I'm Melissa. I actually am almost 1 year in my job at the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center here in Singapore. As those of you who have been around Singapore and are not red-green colorblind like several members of my family will have known that actually we just celebrated our 50th anniversary, 50th year. So Singapore is 50 years old. That's our golden jubilee. So it's been an amazing time to actually just reflect on where we've been and also where we're going. So I'm actually a 5-year-old Singaporean, technically. I have a Japanese-American mother. I have an Indonesian-Chinese father. But I was born maybe about 10 years after Singapore became independent. So I'm kind of a transition type of generation. My mother, actually, at the time, if you can imagine Singapore, her family was horrified that she was going to move from Hollywood to Singapore, because all they knew of Singapore was malaria, and it's an area where there's a lot of war. My father's family felt a little bit differently because they were Indonesian Chinese migrants trying to get, flee from poverty and racial riots. So Singapore seemed to, at least as good kind of place at the time. So I'm in that generation where I do remember hawkers on the street. I remember loud, narrow streets where stuff was all over the place. I remember going to the cinema and thinking, wow, this is so amazing, how incredible, this is so new. And I remember TV not being 24 hours. So I remember the day actually TV did come on in a 24-hour kind of way. I remember the Singapore River smelling and actually looking kind of like a sewer and not being that excited about going very near it. But I don't remember, because I'm not of a previous generation, a Singapore where there was no modern sanitation. I don't remember mass unemployment. I don't remember racial riots. I don't remember growing sweet potato leaves by the side of the road for food. And those are all stories that older Singaporeans have actually told me about their lives. I don't remember singing 4 national anthems, going from God Save the Queen to the Japanese national anthem, to Negaraku, the Malayan, when we were part of Malaysia, to now Majulah Singapura. I only remember 1. So I suppose if you think about where we are today, this has been a pretty effective and successful social experiment. I guess in 50 years you can say we went from about a $500 GDP per capita in 1965 to over $50,000 per capita last year. We have almost full literacy, we have high employment, we have high home ownership, we have 80% people in Singapore actually living in public housing. And public housing is not what we think of in the United States or in other places as being somewhat tenements or the projects. We have public housings which go for over $1 million now. So we've done well. But for MVPC and for me, I asked the question, well, where are we socially? Where are we spiritually? What does this all mean ultimately for us? What do we care about? And I think about it in this sort of way that if in the past our questions of where we are and what we can be began with viability, were we a viable nation? They evolved to being a workability. Are we a productive nation? Can we get things to work? And then in the recent past, we've been kind of enamored by this idea of being a livable city, a livable nation. Where we think about the arts, we think about culture, we think about the environment. But I think for the next 50 years, for the next lap of Singapore, livability is not enough. We need to be a lovable city. But are we a lovable city? I kind of would answer the question with a kind of yes and a kind of no. So there's a characteristic that Singaporeans refer to themselves as kiasu. And kiasu in Hokkien, the local patois, is to be afraid to lose. There's a certain character of Singaporeans which likes to complain. In fact, it was one of the icons of Singapore. If anybody ever saw those cute round circles, complaining was one of the icons of Singapore. We like to compare food, cleanliness, people talking loudly, people talking softly, things being fast, things being slow. So there's that aspect of who we are too. We have $1 billion tuition industry in Singapore. because everybody from the age of like prenatal is like worried about whether you're going to get your kid into the right school that's going to meet the right people that'll help you get to the right, job, and do the right thing, in your life. And we've defined success in a very narrow and sometimes selfish kind of way. So I would say that, are we a lovable city? We can be a lovable city. And there are unintended consequences to our very narrow definition of success and this success mantra. I'll tell you a story, which is a true story, actually. I went to an elite high school, secondary school, here in Singapore to give a talk on a service day. And I was discussing with them the utility of this particular technology that could detect, it was like a motion sensor detector for one-room flats, where usually the older single elderly actually lived. And there was a problem because there was incidences of suicides and there were incidences of people actually dying alone and nobody actually even knowing. So this technology was developed. So we asked the questions to the students, is this a good or a bad idea? And there were different responses. Yes, of course it's a good idea. We'll know if somebody fell down or if somebody's unfortunately passed on. Well, how could it not be a good idea? One of the boys eventually, and this took a long time, finally said, because they are still lonely. And he got it. Because they are still lonely. And I spoke to the teacher after that, and I asked her, so, how are things, going at the school? And she said, I'm actually kind of worried. She said, we had this conversation on solutions to the graying population, our high dependency ratios here in Singapore. And one of the students actually seriously, started discussing euthanasia as an option. I wonder if our narrow definitions of success and our equations of worth and contribution and usefulness, actually then mean that we are denying worth, respect, and dignity to people who can no longer be useful and worthy a contribution in that sense. For me, I think the question is, how can Singaporeans be more, not just for ourselves, but more for others? But I have to tell you, I'm actually very hopeful. I guess I'm an incurable optimist, so that maybe helps. I'm hopeful for a couple different reasons. And the last of one is actually something that we're actually trying to personally do something about, at MVPC. So this spring, we had a different type of spring. We had the passing of actually Mr. Lee, the forceful founding father of Singapore. And what I saw during that week in Singapore was something I've never, ever seen before. I saw queues of Singaporeans who were young, who were old, who were rich, who were poor, who were recent immigrants who had been here and who were born and bred here for generations, all coming together to celebrate, to pay respects to this man who had helped lead and shape the development of where we are today. What was amazing though was that the spontaneous acts of kindness and care and accommodation that you actually saw in these queues, which could have lasted up to 8 hours in the hot sun, believe it or not, waiting to pay respects. And individuals came out and offered to give water. Businesses started to kind of open up their things. And when I was there, one of the places where we were queuing started serving us the pizza that they were cooking, And volunteers came in the middle of the night to pick up trash. It was tremendous. Taxi drivers. We had taxi drivers who were ferrying people home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and refusing to be paid because they just said it's the least that I can do. And we thought, my goodness, this is a different kind of Singapore. And what if we could find ways to create a platform for that spirit that is in us. So one of the things that we decided to do, and this is a project that's been in the sort of skunk works at NVPC for a long time, is actually create a digital giving platform, and a giving platform that would enable people to actually develop their giving life. So if you have Facebook for your social life and you have LinkedIn for your professional life, what if you had giving.sg actually as the place that you would go to actually find ways to give your time, ways to give your money, ways to share your skills. And what if we brought on all the different nonprofits that were, around in Singapore, doing everything from social services to arts and culture to the environment, to education to healthcare, and enabled them to then just say, hey, I need help with this. I need help with that. I mean, what if I need money for this and we need to expand something? Because at the end of the day, I mean, you ask nonprofits, what do they need? They all say money. But actually, at the end of the day, what are they usually using money for? They're using money for people. So where are the people who could come and actually help bridge that gap? So giving.sg is one of those things that we think can actually be kind of like a game changer and a culture changer for us here in Singapore. Ultimately, we would love to see a situation where, say, the girl in the photograph is a teacher who's in that school that I went to visit, and maybe the older person seated there with her is somebody who was telling us through giving.sg that their neighbor needed help, that their neighbor was alone, that their neighbor needed food delivery, that their neighbor, whatever it happened to be. What if giving.sg in our next iterations, where it was able to go beyond just linking organizations to actually linking citizens and people? So for us, we see this as one possible way that we can actually facilitate a shift for Singaporeans. A shift from thinking about how can we be the best in the world to thinking about how we can be the best for the world. Thank you.